This episode is brought to you by my friend Rebecca Walser, a financial expert who can help you protect your wealth. Book your free call with her team by going to friendofdinesh.com. That's friendofdinesh.com. Coming up, I'll reveal how the prosecutorial and police agencies of the U.S. government are going to bat for Hunter Biden, the son of the mafia don. I'll argue we can't move on from Biden family corruption because we're in this position on account of all the moving on we've done in the past. I'll reveal a telling detail about the pipe bomb controversy, suggesting it was planted by the feds, and James OKeefe of the OKeefe Media Group joins me. He's going to talk about his current exploits. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble or listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to the podcast. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Show.
Needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast.
When yesterday I mentioned on the podcast the Hunter Biden deal, I had just found out about it. I knew that there was a deal that he had struck with the prosecutors on tax fraud and on a gun charge, but I knew nothing about the content of the deal. And now I do. The details are now out. And it's very clear that this is a cover-up. This is a cover-up that is disguised as justice. It's disguised as justice in the sense that the left is able to now say, well, listen, no one's above the law. Hunter Biden has been held accountable. He has gotten his just desserts, and we can now sort of close the book on the Hunter Biden affair. But this is the point. They made this deal in order that Biden be protected, that all the crooks in the Biden family be protected, that Hunter Biden himself be protected, because after all, when you make a deal with one guy, one of the crooks, it has to be a deal that the crook can live with. And so it has to be soft enough for Hunter Biden to go, okay, listen, this is not pleasant, but I'll take it. And it's going to let all the other guys jump up and down and hug each other with glee because they feel like they've now gotten away with it, because this probe had the prospect of opening up the whole can of worms, the whole Pandora's box, the full scandal of Biden corruption, which extends far and extends wide. We know that the Biden Justice Department and the IRS have been trying their best to do, well, the political scientist Jonathan Turley probably has the right phrase for it. He calls it a controlled demolition. And what is a controlled demolition? Think about it. I'm going to try to surgically blow up a building in such a way that it doesn't cause collateral damage. It, in fact, protects all the buildings around it. And that's what's going on here. They're protecting the real crooks, the big crooks. This is the son of the mafia don agreeing to essentially plead to a parking ticket so that the book is closed on his bigger crimes which involve the don himself. So very bad stuff, a very bad sign of what is going on in our government and in our country at this time. Now, to look at some of the details, Hunter Biden is agreeing to plead to 2 tax misdemeanors, kind of a whoop-de-doo. They're misdemeanors, not felonies, and this basically means that he'll get a slap on the wrist. He's also agreed to plead guilty to a gun charge. And again, normally this gun charge is pretty serious. In fact, normally it carries years in prison. In fact, we'll find out in a moment that there are people who go to prison on tax charges and on gun charges, but not Hunter Biden. Because by agreeing to this plea on the gun charge, he enters into what is called a pretrial diversion agreement, which not only escapes prison, Hunter Biden is not going to jail, but also means that Hunter Biden can then own a gun again. So he doesn't even lose his right to own a gun. Now, the gun charge itself stems from the idea that when you buy a gun, you're required to answer a questionnaire and truthfully disclose. And they ask you, have you taken drugs? Are you a drug addict? And if you are, you have to answer yes. Well, Hunter Biden answered no. So that's where the gun charge comes from. It's lying on an application on a key question having to do with whether or not Hunter Biden was a crack addict, which he was. And we know this actually from innumerable pieces of evidence, including video evidence on the Hunter Biden laptop. So this is a sweetheart deal. It's letting the guy off the hook. And all of this is particularly bitter to swallow. Well, let me just read here. This is right off the DOJ website, and it's up there as far as I know right now. Jenna Ellis actually found this. It talks about the fact that these pretrial diversion programs, a kind of slap on the wrist, are not applicable. I'm not quoting. Any pretrial diversion program created by a U.S. Attorney's Office shall exclude any individual who is, and then it has 6 points, but I'm reading point 3, accused of an offense involving brandishing or use of a firearm or any other deadly weapon. So if someone has improper use of a firearm, which was the case here with Hunter Biden, he should not get this deal. But he's getting this deal. Why? Because he's Hunter Biden, because he is the son of the mafia don. Debbie pointed out to me this morning that the rapper Kodak Black reminded me, I actually heard about this at the time, but this is a guy who got had a weapons charge very similar to Hunter Biden, and he got 3 years in prison. 3 years in prison for this exact offense, which Hunter Biden is essentially going to get off of. Think about Trump. Trump is facing, if you add up all the charges, 400 years in prison for what? Slow walking documents back to the archives. So this is where we are with equal justice under the law. Gateway Pundit has an interesting article where they compare Hunter Biden to the grandma of the 69-year-old Pam Hemphill. So Pam Hemphill is a cancer patient. She's actually somebody who is she's a drug and alcohol counselor. She used to be an addict at one point, but she's been sober for decades. This is somebody who goes into the Capitol. She takes some selfies. She's in there for precisely 10 minutes. And she gets 60 days in prison. And that's for a misdemeanor. Hunter Biden could have been facing multiple felony charges. And it's not just the tax stuff. I mean, the tax stuff itself is kind of minor. It's kind of like saying, you robbed the bank, and instead of getting you on the robbery, we're going to go after you because, hey, you took all this money from the bank. It's income to you. Have you paid taxes on it, Dinesh? So the tax charge is a secondary charge as it is, and yet it could have been pursued with vigor, and it clearly wasn't. So clearly this is favored son treatment for Hunter Biden. And the one hope we have here is the Republican House, which is not controlled by the Justice Department, is not controlled by the special prosecutors. These are people who are trying to get to the bottom of the whole business and at the very least put it before the American people. I hope that they're successful in doing this. To do it, they have to circumvent the blackout in the media which has sort of arisen like a kind of protective phalanx to protect the sins and crimes of the Biden family. Debbie and I love the MyPillow slippers, and right now MyPillow has a massive closeout sale happening on their all-season slippers. Now, listeners and viewers continually make the My Slippers the #1 selling MyPillow product. I have a feeling you're going to want to stock up on these slippers when you hear this offer. Now, when you use my promo code Dinesh, you'll get the all-season slippers for $25, regularly $149.98. That's over $120 in savings. It's limited to 10 pairs at checkout. These will sell out, trust me. My slippers have an exclusive 4-layer design that you won't find in any other slipper. The patented layers make these slippers ultra comfortable, extremely durable. They help relieve stress on your feet, and you can wear them anytime, anywhere. They also come in a ton of additional sizes, all new colors. Just go to mypillow.com, use promo code Dinesh, grab a pair or multiple pairs of the all-season slippers for $25 each, regularly priced at $149.98, limited to 10 pairs at checkout. Remember, enter promo code Dinesh or call 800-876-0227. That number again, 800-876-0227 for this incredible offer. It won't last long, so order now. A chorus of media commentators have stepped forward in the wake of the Hunter Biden deal with the prosecutors to say, oh, well, Hunter Biden is now being held accountable for what he did. Let's move on. And this concept of let's moving on is something that I hear even on the Republican side. Oh, Dinesh, let's just not talk about the 2020 election. Let's move on. Oh, Dinesh, you're so focused on January 6th, but shouldn't we be looking forward, not backward? Let's move on. And I want to argue that this mentality of let's move on is itself responsible for the situation in which we're in. In other words, what I'm saying is that when we don't take bad things seriously, or we try to just sort of overlook them, the things get worse and the next thing comes along and then we take the same attitude. So we've had this habit, and I'm using the collective we here. I don't think it's true of me, but it is true of people certainly on the other side, and they have base motives because they're trying to protect a deep nest of corruption on the part of the Democratic Party that involves the top leadership, people like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, certainly a lot of the top officials in government, and of course the entire Biden family. So this idea of moving on, as I say, is the problem. And it's the people who say, let's move on, think that they're being, mature. They think that they're being grown-ups about the situation. There are certain things in life. You can't fight every battle. And so there are times when you just kind of slog on ahead. But that comes at a very high cost. And we're hearing it even now with regard to impeachment of Biden. I'm sure there's a little part of Kevin McCarthy that goes, why are we trying to impeach? Should we really be trying to impeach Biden? Let's move on. We have an election coming up next year. Let's focus on that. But look, when this all goes back, let's just look back to when Barack Obama unleashed the IRS on the Tea Party, or when Obama unleashed his case against me on campaign finance reform. A lot of Republicans were like, well, that's very unfortunate, but let's move on. When Hillary Clinton had her Benghazi scandal and the corruption scandals involving the Clinton Foundation, the destruction of her emails, destroying evidence. Again, Comey comes forward and goes, well, no reasonable prosecutor would go ahead with this. Really? They're going ahead with Trump on a lot less. But even then, many Republicans were like, let's move on. Look at the FBI corruption. Look at the Steele dossier, the concocted Russia collusion, the Trump is a Russian asset. All of that. Where's the accountability for that? Oh, let's move on. Let's just let that be. Then we turn to COVID. Where did COVID come from? Well, it now looks like COVID came from a lab. And yet, not only was this denied, not only did we have top scientists saying this is not the case, they were confident that it came from a natural source, from a wet market, even though there was not one shred of evidence that it did. And now as the balance tips, where are the apologies? Where are the acknowledgments? Where's the accountability for China? Let's move on. So this let's move on has become a numbing doctrine of ignoring corruption, accepting that things are really bad and are going to get worse. And my point is that this mentality itself is partly to blame for this kind of thing. So we don't want to move on. We need to draw a line in the sand. We need to recognize that, look, it's one thing. If you know that there's corruption and you're not willing to do anything about it, just step forward and say the country is run by crooks. We've got a mafia don in the White House. His son just got away with murder, or the sort of legal equivalent of being a crook himself. And the United States is now a banana republic. But we don't want to say that. We don't want to admit that. We don't want to say that we're really no better than a lot of these other countries where this kind of thing occurs out in the open. So the difference between us and them is not that we don't do it, but that we maintain a facade. We maintain a vocabulary. Oh, look at the January 6th defendants. They're showing up in court. There's a prosecutor. There's a defense counsel. There's a jury. Now, this jury is, in a sense, no different than the kind of jury that Stalin pulled together for one of his show trials. Why? Because it's a jury with a predetermined outcome. A, it's not a jury of one's peers. B, it sort of doesn't matter what you did. You're accused of conspiracy. You're like, listen, I wasn't even in Washington, D.C. at the time of the January 6th events. I wasn't even there. Well, yeah, but you posted something on social media. You talked to your friends, and one of your friends went into the Capitol. So since you talked to your friend, this is taking words and ransacking all their meaning out of them. And this is what we're seeing in our legal system now, day after day. It applies to people like Trump, the way that they're going after Trump on really absurd charges. charges. Stormy Daniels, really. And again, the classified documents that are possessed by every other president. And the only difference with Trump, well, in some ways, if you look at the difference between Trump and Biden, it's to the benefit of Trump. And yet the show goes on. So we can't move on. We won't move on. People who say we should move on are part of the problem, not the solution. Debbie and I had a New Year's resolution to lose weight. Thankfully, PhD weight loss came to our rescue. Debbie has already lost 23 pounds, is almost on maintenance. I'm now on maintenance, having lost a total of 27 pounds. The program is based on science and nutrition. No injections, no pills, no long hours in the gym, no severe calorie restriction, just good, sound, scientifically proven nutrition. It's so simple. They make it easy by providing 80% of your food at no additional cost. They tell you when and what to eat. And guess what? You can do this without ever being hungry. The founder, Dr. Ashley Lucas, has her PhD in chronic disease and sports nutrition. She's also a registered dietitian. She helps people lose weight and, most important, maintain that weight loss for life. So are you ready to take the step of losing weight like Debbie and I have? If so, call PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition today at 864-644-1900. You can also find them online at myphdweightloss.com. Here's the number to call. Write it down, 864-644-1900. Guys, I'm really happy to welcome back to the podcast our friend James O'Keefe, CEO of the OKeefe Media Group. You can follow him on Twitter at James O'Keefe III, 123, and then website OKeefeMediaGroup.com. James, welcome back. Great to have you on. It's been, well, a tumultuous few months for you setting up an independent operation. I just want to start by asking you, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing absolutely great. I feel untethered, invigorated, independent, uncontrolled. And we've gone from exposing some very powerful people, Dinesh, to now exposing probably the most powerful people. So it can be sometimes terrifying. And there's ups and downs in this journey. But overall, I'm doing well.
Well, I do want to congratulate you, James, because number one, it's heartbreaking to see an organization you built somehow be sort of pulled out from under you, and then to set up independently a new group and hit the ground running in the way that you have is really impressive to see. Let's talk about this latest story that you just broke, a very important story. Tell us about it. Who did you? Who is exposed, and what does he say on camera? I'm just saying this. I've actually watched it. I'm just saying it for the benefit of people who don't know what the news story is.
Well, this is a BlackRock. BlackRock is a major financial institution and asset manager. They own, have stakes in many large corporations that people may not know this, but Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock are incredibly powerful. I first learned of this company, BlackRock, after I did a story on Pfizer, and after Fox removed Tucker Carlson. I noticed that there was a large ownership stake, equity stake in Pfizer and Fox, and BlackRock was near the top of that. So we set our sights on BlackRock, and our undercover journalist met with a recruiter who is a self-described gatekeeper who hired all the talent at BlackRock. And while he didn't technically work in finance, he hired a lot of the financial people. So we thought that was a good area to start. And it is like many of the exposés I've done, Dinesh, over the last 15 years. It is just, it watches like a Saturday Night Live sketch of what you would think a sleazy Wall Street sort of person. He talks about, how we buy off senators. Senators are effing cheap. He's sort of got this ghoulish, dark, evil way about him. He talks about how sleazy it is, and how they run the world and how they control people's fate. So it's really interesting. We had a few meetings in New York City. I actually caught up with this guy just on yesterday, confronted him, and he ran into a police station to try to turn himself in or try to turn me in. It's unclear. The video is wild. And I also reached out to BlackRock for comment on some of these statements. Their managing director of corporate communications was talking to me, but eventually declined an official comment, Dinesh.
Now, What I got out of this interview, this undercover interview, and I think these undercover interviews are fascinating because it's almost like, normally when you meet someone, they say certain things to you in public, and that's their public performance, if you will. But you don't have access to what they're thinking, to what their real beliefs are, because they don't put them out there. And this is especially true of people who are managed by media managers and politicians and so on. But what you do is you get these guys unguarded. And so as a result, they spill the beans. They say what they're really thinking. And it's really valuable to hear it. And what I got from this interview was that basically this guy was saying that we are sort of a fake democracy, right? Because he didn't say it this way, but what he's saying is that our politicians are up for sale. He goes, companies like BlackRock can buy them for like 10 grand, $10,000. And so this, under normal circumstances, this kind of thing would be a scandal and would be something that would require careful scrutiny. What does it really say about our society that you got these money people who think this way?
Yes.
Are you finding that the media is trying to just go silent on this kind of topic? What do they do with your exposés? It seems like they try to bury them through ignoring them.
Yeah, I think it's like the reverse Gandhi, right? So Gandhi once, right? First you ignore you, then you laugh at you, then you attack. Now it's like first they attack me, then they laugh at me, then they try to ignore me. That's what I found in my life generally. But I think these sorts of topics like BlackRock and Vanguard, these are the most powerful people in the world. The first thing I was told by my advisors and people close to me is these are the sorts of people that you should be scared of them. Like, so it's terrifying. They have a lot of power. Most people don't look into these companies, Dinesh, because they're owned by these companies. I had the same sort of phenomenon with Pfizer. Pfizer controls the vast majority of advertising revenue for most cable news outlets. So it's not so much that they don't think it's journalistically interesting. They just are not allowed to investigate that which feeds them. I think it was Upton Sinclair who once said something like that you cannot, it's amazing what a man won't understand when his salary depends upon him not understanding it. So that's what this is about. I don't think it's about left or right here. In fact, I mean, there's nothing political about this. A sleazy Wall Street recruiter talking about how he runs the world, buys politicians, and these sorts of statements. And then credit to the undercover journalist who obtained it. One of the best. Also, the same person that recorded Charlie Chester at CNN some years ago. And she joined OMG. She followed me on my journey. So it's really an eye-opening expose. I think it'll inspire other people to do likewise. It's only part one of a series. And again, like I said, you'll be seeing the video of me sitting down with Serge Varley this evening.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, more with James O'Keefe. If aches and pains are your problem, Relief Factor is your remedy. Debbie and I started taking Relief Factor a couple of years ago. The difference we've seen in our joints, nothing short of amazing. Aches and pains are totally gone thanks to this 100% drug-free solution called Relief Factor. How does it work? Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation that's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor love it and order more because it works for them. Debbie's a true believer. She can now do the exercises that for a long time she wasn't able to do. So Relief Factor has been a big game changer for her aunt, other members of our family, Mike here in the studio, and for many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4-RELIEF to find out more about this offer. The number again, 800-4-RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference. I'm back with James O'Keefe, CEO of OKeefe Media Group, the website okeefemediagroup.com. James, the remarkable thing is that we can both remember back not so long ago when the left had a sort of built-in antagonism to Wall Street. Remember Occupy Wall Street, all these massive Wall Street corporations with huge amounts of money. And so if you get a corporate guy talking about how they buy off politicians and run the world, normally you'd have the left-wing media all over this, but it's been an interesting somersault in our politics where the left now rushes to the defense of these massive hedge funds and money guys. And is this a reflection of the fact that the Democrats are now the party of the rich and they protect these kinds of people and the Republicans are the party of the working class?
Well, it's interesting observation, because the other thing that Serge Varley says in this BlackRock hidden camera investigation is that the Ukraine war is good. He says, quote, real effing good for our business. This is Serge Varley, BlackRock, Wall Street individual, employee, executive on tape, saying that when Russia bombs Ukraine, the price of grain grows up because a lot of wheat is in Ukraine, and then they trade off the volatility of that. And he's talking about it's exciting when SHIT goes wrong. He says normal people don't care about what I'm saying. This is what Serge is saying. He says because this is beyond them. So it's every venality, evil stereotype you can imagine. And he says the politicians are in my pocket. I got $500,000 right now. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who wins, he says. So these are things that, I think we can all agree are wrong. It's not about left versus right. It's dark. And I don't see the left criticizing it, Dinesh. I think they're ignoring. I did get Will Sommer at the Daily Beast did contact me, but not about this. He contacted me while I was releasing this about something else to deflect from this, try to smear me. But I think the rise of someone like perhaps an RFK Jr., who is a Democrat in name, old-fashioned Democrat, I suppose, is a barometer of where we are in society, where they, meaning the institutions, paragons of those in power in media, might try to ignore this. But the people, Vox Populi, the people out there, I think are in line with this being wrong. And I think this is waking people up, this sort of expose journalism. This guy says in the tape that he sort of relies upon people not being woken up. But I think people are waking up, and I think this sort of journalism unites people. I think a subject like this, just like the Pfizer story, I think people are waking up on Fauci and those sorts of issues. And I think we need to do more sorts of journalism on these types of things, which have a tendency to unite people around common themes.
You mentioned a moment ago that these big agglomerations of money, Vanguard and BlackRock and so on, have enormous amounts of power. Isn't it a fact that in some ways we are the ones who give them that kind of power? And I say that because so many people, and me included, have a large part of our savings accumulated over many, many years, invested in mutual funds, invested in various types of financial institutions that are supposed to deploy this capital toward, protecting our retirement, getting us a good return. But what you're saying is that it also gives these guys an enormous amount of political power that can easily be misused.
Yes, it's the consolidation of these institutions, and it's something that we're going to have to figure out. Public policy makers are going to have to figure out. I think on a journalistic level, it's disconcerting to see them own such large percentages or equity in organizations that are supposed to be truth seeking. And I think that's just speaking about what I do. I mean, right now I 100% own OKeefe Media Group. It's I've taken no debt or equity. And I think it's very difficult for truth tellers these days at these sort of institutions that we're supposed to trust. Disney, ABC, Fox, CNN. It's very difficult to tell the truth when you're literally paid by people that you're not supposed to investigate. And I think that it's terrifying.
I mean, you're making a subtle point that I think is important even for the right, namely that, what's true of you, it's also true of me. So because I have my own film company. If you want to make an objection and demand that Dinesh be fired, the letter comes to me, I throw it in the trash. So what you're saying is that we have a degree of independence, which there are even people on the right who don't have because of the kind of leverage exercised by companies and investors that often get to pull the strings.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to tell the truth, and you also have to surround yourself with people, even if you own your company, with people who are not weak, because of the amount of attacks that you get. I have no question, Dinesh, that after I'm done with this series, the attacks will escalate. We have a denial of service attack yesterday that all of our tip lines, Proton Mail, have been inundated with municipal and state government spam. I mean, literally 25 to 30 messages a minute. That's every second or two is another message. So it's called denial of service attack, meaning they're trying to prevent me from doing my job. I don't know who they is. And I'm, and also is removed from the company that I founded. I mean, that's a pretty remarkable turn of events, which now, by the way, is suing me. I think there's room for OMG and Project Veritas. We need more people doing this sort of thing. Everyone should be exposing corruption as far as I'm concerned. But now they're asking a federal judge to stop me from talking to people, even people like you, to try to stop me from talking to people I've known for 15, 20 years. They're trying to get an injunction, again, a federal judge to issue an injunction against me to stop me from working. So I think it's a line in the sand. I wish they weren't disparaging me, and I wish they weren't doing that. And I think a lot of people wish they weren't doing that. But I think that line that separates good and evil runs through each and every one of us. It certainly runs through people in the conservative movement. Donors have never told me what to do. Any donor that ever said, please do this, I said, I can't assure you that I'm going to do what you're asking me. Just give to my general fund and I'll follow the facts where they lead me. But it takes enormous, that's a huge risk when you're independent. I think a lot of people have wanted to control me. They found out they can't control me. And then you become a threat, and then it becomes dangerous. It's hard enough when I do it for my own company. I can't imagine how dangerous and terrifying it is when you work for one of these large corporations.
Well, James, you're occupying a unique niche and doing a unique type of job that I would say no one else is doing. Guys, James O'Keefe, CEO of OKeefe Media Group, the website OKeefeMediaGroup.com. James, as always, a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Can you believe all this economic madness? The debt ceiling crisis has come to a head. The administration is doing its best to force more government spending. They have reached a settlement to get the deal done for now, but our national debt continues to skyrocket. Well, how are you protecting your savings? Times like these are when concerned savers like me turn to gold. And I, like thousands of similar-minded people, buy my gold from Birch Gold. Here's the easiest way to do it. Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. You don't pay a penny out of pocket. As the BRICS group, Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa, band together against the dollar, more and more central banks are diversifying. You know what they're buying? Gold. Follow their lead. Text Dinesh to 989898. You'll get a free information kit on gold. There's no obligation, just information. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Thousands of happy customers. Birch Gold can help protect your savings too. To get started, text Dinesh to 989898 today. Remember the pipe bomber? The pipe bomber is the guy caught on video, by the way. There is a video of the pipe bomber. In fact, I'm going to hold it up and show it to you. Here he is. You may not be able to see very clearly. It's just a copy. But this is the guy in a hoodie. You can't see his face, but this is supposedly the individual who planted the pipe bombs both at the RNC, the Republican National Committee headquarters, and also the DNC, both in Washington, D.C. And this was done on the night of January 5th. At the time, there was widespread reporting to the effect that this pipe bomb was somehow part of the plot of January 6th. It was part of what the Trumpsters were doing in order to basically disrupt the proceedings involving the election, that the pipe bomber, you're looking for a domestic terrorist. Well, here he is. Now, very interestingly, the identity of this pipe bomber has never been disclosed. And that in itself is very odd. Why? Because let's think about it. This pipe bomber was in possession of a phone. And normally when you do cell phone geo-tracking, think for example of 2,000 mules, you don't know when the mules are going to show up. You're going to look from the data to find out who showed up when and where. The advantage of the pipe bomber is he's on video. You know the exact date, you know the exact time, and you know that the guy had a phone. So simply by doing basic cell phone geo-tracking, we, and by we here I mean the US government, should know who this man is. So why don't we know? Well, a very interesting revelation or detail came out in some testimony that Stephen D'Antonio, who's Stephen D'Antonio? Well, this is a guy who's been the head of, well, he was the head of the Detroit FBI during the Whitmer kidnapping hoax, I'm going to call it. He was then transferred to Washington, D.C., where he became the head of the FBI in D.C. for the January 6th operation. So this is a guy who's been at the top rung of the FBI. And in a recent interview with the House Oversight Committee, by the way, all of this reported very effectively in an article in Revolver magazine. I want to give my friend Darren Beatty credit for this. Stephen D'Antonio goes before the House and he says, we have not been able to find the identity of the pipe bomber. Why? Because the cell phone data is corrupted. Now, this is the intellectual equivalent of the dog ate my homework, because you've got a cell phone data provider that is normally reliable. According to Stephen D'Antonio, they tried to get the data from the provider, and at the exact day and moment and time that we find this guy that you can see on camera who has a cell phone, we can't find him because the data is corrupted. And what that tells me is I smell a rat. And what I mean by I smell a rat is I smell the possibility that it's the FBI that planted those bombs or planted the pipe bomb. Now, let's remember that the pipe bomb was a kind of, well, there are different ways to try to think about it. To me, the most plausible way is this. The pipe bomb was intended in case the orchestration of January 6th didn't really work. So in other words, the left was hoping that the Trumpsters would make their way toward the Capitol, that they would get inside the Capitol, and then, hey, insurrection, we gotcha. And think about it, that January 6th insurrection shut down all the discussion about all the violence unleashed by BLM, by Antifa, the seizure of the Portland courthouse, the burning of St. John. All of that was shut down with, here are the real domestic terrorists. So it worked beautifully for the left. But they didn't know it was going to work in advance. So my point is, one possibility, and I'm only offering it as a possibility, they planted the pipe bomb in order to be able to say later, we found this bomb that was planted the previous night right before January 6th. So they would have tried to use that as evidence that there was a domestic terror plot underway. Let's remember the FBI loves these plots. They love these plots because it's more funding for the FBI. It's more resources for the FBI. It enhances the importance of the FBI. And at the same time, it advances the narrative of the left. So in a sense, they didn't need the pipe bomber. Why? Because they got January 6th. January 6th worked beautifully, as I say, for them. And so suddenly the pipe bomb was it became something to be disposed of. And so I think this is the reason why they, quote, can't find the pipe bomber. They can't find the pipe bomber, perhaps because he was one of them and they no longer need him. Guys, I'd like to invite you to check out my Locals channel. I post a lot of exclusive content there, including content that is censored on other social media platforms. On Locals, you get Dinesh Unchained, Dinesh Uncensored. You can also interact with me directly. Last night, I did my weekly Q&A, which I do every Tuesday, and no topic is off limits. I also uploaded some very cool films to Locals, documentaries, feature films, both my films and also films by other independent producers. 2,000 Mules is up there, and I'm doing a new film this year. You'll be getting the inside scoop from me on Locals, and if you're an annual subscriber, you can stream and watch all these films for free. So check out my channel. It's free to check it out. Dinesh.locals.com. I'd love to have you along for this great ride. Again, Dinesh.locals.com. One of the remarkable aspects of the Jeffrey Epstein case is that we know about Epstein, and we know about Ghislaine Maxwell, his sidekick. And Epstein committed suicide. Ha ha ha. And Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail, but clearly not talking. And so where are Epstein's customers? Where are all the people who are on the Epstein powerful group list? Ghislaine Maxwell supposedly had her list. Where is her list? It's not as if the U.S. government doesn't possess these things. It's that the U.S. government doesn't want to release them. And so you've got a pedophile ring with people who are committing the worst kind of atrocities and abuses. but there are clearly important people on that list. Probably people from both parties, although I'm going to go out on a limb, not a very long limb, and project that most of these people are Democrats. People go, well, how do you know, Dinesh? How do you know Trump's not on that list? Well, let me tell you this: if Trump was on that list would be on the that list would be on the front page of the New York Times. So Trump is not on the list. We can be pretty sure of that. Now, here's the kind of powerful person that was involved with Epstein, and I want to tell you how we found out about it. It's kind of purely by accident. I'm talking here about the first family of the U.S. Virgin Islands. This is the former governor, a guy named John de Jong, and his wife, Cecile de Jong. And the only reason we know about this is that there is a lawsuit between the U.S. Virgin Islands and J.P. Morgan. Now, J.P. Morgan is accused of being complicit in the Epstein scandal, and J.P. Morgan has evidently agreed to make a financial settlement that is worth almost $300 million to be paid to a group of these Epstein accusers. So, but because there's an ongoing lawsuit, and usually when people are sued, they settle and they go silent about it. Think, for example, about Fox and the Dominion lawsuit. But in this case, apparently, J.P. Morgan has decided to hit back. And so what J.P. Morgan has now revealed in documents is that Jeffrey Epstein had a very cozy relationship with the first family of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And what does that mean? Well, there's an email from Cecile de Jong, the wife of the governor, basically submitting her own daughter's tuition bill for Skidmore College in America and asking Jeffrey Epstein to pay it through his foundation. So Jeffrey Epstein then is essentially handing out financial favors to people like the first family of the Virgin Islands, and it gets much worse than this. Apparently, Jeffrey Epstein was in cahoots with this first family of the Virgin Islands, and they were providing Epstein with access to the political elite of the islands. And not only that, but there was apparently in the legislature a bill affecting sex offenders. And as if this needs to go into sort of the territory of being almost like a movie script, the first family of the Virgin Islands submitted this bill, which was being considered for a vote, to Jeffrey Epstein to comment on it. And sure enough, Jeffrey Epstein goes, maybe we should distinguish between, I'm quoting Epstein now, offenders and predators. Basically, Epstein is saying, well, listen, someone could be a sex offender, but not necessarily a predator. So what is Epstein trying to do? He's clearly trying to weaken the effect of this bill or this proposed law on sex offenders. And evidently, Cecile de Jong is trying to help Epstein weaken the bill. In fact, at one point, she writes an email to Epstein. I'm now quoting it. I know this was a horrible week, and I'm really sorry about how things panned out. Not being able to take someone at their word is incredibly frustrating. So she's basically saying that she was counting on legislators that she was talking to water down the sex offender bill. But evidently it didn't happen. They apparently turned on her and decided, no, we're going to have this bill, have the firm penalties against sex offenders that it originally had. They didn't water it down. And so she is cravenly apologizing to Jeffrey. So this is the world. I'm only doing a segment on this to show you the kind of sordid world in which Jeffrey Epstein moved, the sordid people. I'm sure that Cecile de Jong and her husband John de Jong are not the worst of them, but this is how people in power interacted with this wicked man. Last time I quoted Christopher Hitchens saying that if God wanted man to live up to his high standards, quote, he should have taken more care to invent a different species. And I made the point that Christianity actually agrees with Hitchens that the standards are difficult. In fact, more than difficult, they are impossible. And I want to pick that idea up today by noting that Christianity raises the bar even higher than other religions by insisting that to enter God's kingdom, we have to be perfect. Not good enough, but perfect. Being good is not good enough. And no one is perfect, right? There's an old saying in Christianity that the ground is level at the foot of the cross. Another way to put it is that we are all sinners. And it's not to say that some people aren't better than others, some people sin less than others. Yeah, sure. But ultimately, none of this really matters because none of us can make it under our own steam. So the solution then is for us to use a Christian phrase, die unto ourselves, become totally different people, morally pure in the eyes of God. And here's a quotation from the Bible: "For unless the grain of wheat die unto itself, it shall not produce fruit." So here we see that Christianity agrees with Hinduism and Buddhism on the need to extinguish the old self, but it disagrees in declaring in advance that this project from a human enterprise is not possible. It's not possible because human beings can't do this. They can't pull this off. So how do we reconcile, this is kind of the key question, divine holiness and justice with human salvation? So the Christian answer is pretty simple. It is that God decided to pay the price himself for human sin. So not just this sin or that sin, but all sin. And God does this by becoming man and by dying on the cross. Now, think of how incredible this idea is of God. Well, let's leave aside for a moment the dying on the cross. Think of how remarkable it is simply for God to become man. No other religion can even conceive this. The Greek and Roman gods of antiquity, some would sometimes, put on a human guise or would disguise themselves as humans or mortals, but they didn't actually become mortal. The Mexican author Carlos Fuentes once wrote that when the Christian missionaries first presented their doctrines to the Aztecs were completely confused. They were uncomprehending. Why? Here's Fuentes, quote, "In a universe accustomed to seeing men sacrificed to the gods, nothing amazed the Indians more than the sight of a God who sacrificed himself to men." So you see here how Christianity is a kind of inversion of what the Aztecs, and in fact, the Aztecs were in this sense in common with other religions. Man has to be put on the altar and sort of chopped up into pieces, if you will, for God's sake. But in Christianity, God is put on the cross and chopped up, so to speak, into pieces for man's sake. So what other religions hold to be incomprehensible, absurd, even scandalous, Christianity holds to be true. Now, the writer Richard Dawkins says that atonement, which is the central doctrine of Christianity, is, quote, "vicious, sadomasochistic, and repellent." But I don't think it is at all. In fact, I think as Christians, we view the atonement of Christ as a beautiful sacrifice. Somehow God doesn't just become man, but he takes on the sins and burdens of man in order to make us eligible for the heavenly kingdom. A pastor I knew in San Diego, Bob Botsford, puts it this way: Christ paid a debt he didn't owe because we owe a debt we can't pay. So Christ on the cross literally assumes the darkness, the loneliness, the sin of the world. And through the extremity of Golgotha, the path to the cross, Christ reconciles divine justice and divine mercy and really provides us with a passport to heaven. So the bridge, I talked earlier about a bridge between the human level and the divine level. This bridge that man is unable to build up to God, God has now built for man.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.